Dads in real life. Welcome. That's the start for today.
Yes.
Hey, today we just kick things off right away with the ongoing segment we're gonna call Dad Memories. I wish
Gotcha.
there was a again. I think of all these like edits in my head
One
of like a
day.
sparkly rainbow going
One
across the
day,
thing.
sir. Once
Yep.
we figure out
So
how
just
to
imagine that.
AI this thing, then yeah, we'll get that done.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, we're gonna start by kicking things off, warming up the conversation with some stories from potentially your childhood when you were a kid. Things that your dad maybe did with you that were potentially core memories that maybe
Mhm.
your dad didn't even realize he was doing, but come to mind.
Yes.
So do you have any of those?
Um,
Any things that
there
you
there's a there's a couple. So there's one that I think was a core memory because it was part of a routine. Huh? You like that? The R word we talk about a lot. And then
Mhm.
secondly, it was a thing that he did. So I grew up with two brothers, three boys in the household. So it's one of those things that he did with each son. So it's one of the things like we looked forward to because we knew it was like one-on-one time with dad. So I'll
Ah,
I'll
yeah.
I'll go over the routine one. You can share something, and then I'll go back to my like each individual son thing, just so that it's not me talking for 20 minutes. But one of the core memories I have, and it's one of the funny enough, it's one of the things that I do now with my kids is so I grew up in the 80s, right? And this is where the archetypes of breadwinner, homemaker were pretty much divided down the middle. And so
Yeah.
my dad wasn't I think a lot of dads weren't home like after school hours. I was a latchkey kid, right? So when he did come home, it was like either dinner time or like right after dinner time. It was like that kind of schedule. So one of the things without a miss, right, unless he was traveling internationally, was rarely would it be tucked into bedtime, but when we were in bed and there was like a knock at the door, you knew it was dad. So dad always checked in with us, no matter how late it was. He'd wake us up like at 11:30 at night, like, "Hey, how's it going? How was school today?" So without fault,
Ah.
right? No
Yep.
matter what he was doing or where he was at, and if he was traveling, it was a phone call. But it was with every night, knock knock. Hey, how you doing? Tell me some highlights. So there was always, even though it was brief, there's always a download, right? A download
Yeah.
on my day for him, his day for me, and then reconnecting
Yeah.
on any questions I had about life. Like that was like our moment in time every single day.
Yeah.
So that's a core memory for me. And so now that's what we do. Like we tuck in our kids every night and we check in. Like our process is like an hour long to go to bed, but it's well
Yeah.
worth it because it's an opportunity without the hustle and bustle of homework and pickups and drop offs and all this kind of stuff where it's like that quiet hour after shower time where people are just kind of putzing. That's when I do my
Yeah.
check-ins individually with the girls.
Yeah.
Hey, tell me something fantastic that happened today, or tell me something amazing that you did today. And so that's where I get my daily download. So no matter if it may feel like ships in a harbor passing in the night, there's always a point in time where we're kind of anchored and checking in. So that's one core memory that I had growing up that I currently do with my kids. So how about you? What's a core memory of pops of dad growing up?
That's awesome. I love that. We have a similar bedtime rhythm as well now, and with our kiddos. But again, the ways that we grew up very similarly. In the fact that you had two brothers growing up. I also had two brothers growing up. Now I was the oldest. You were,
The oldest as well.
but you wait. You and your brother are twins.
No, I have brothers
No,
that are twins.
that's right. That's right. That's right. Yes, of course. Yes.
By the
Okay.
way, I love this
Mm-hmm.
delay. I'll edit
So
this out later, but I love the delay because on my side, I could see you waiting for me to finish talking and then respond. So this is
yeah.
gonna be great. This is gonna be great.
See, I was a little worried about that because you would freeze and it was like silent for like 5 seconds. I'm like, it's coming, and
Coming.
then
Yeah.
okay. So yeah. Wow. I was so in tune to what you were talking about that it made me forget what I was thinking of. Oh, so you talked about a thing that is routine
Yeah.
that was a core memory. And for me, we had a similar thing. So the routine for me that was a core memory that I look back fondly on, even though now I realize it wasn't a whole lot of years, was our time in jujitsu. My
Mm.
dad taught our jujitsu class with his friend, and so on Fridays we had jujitsu in the evenings, and I can just remember very vividly, of course, doing that together, me and my brothers, as they got older and got into it as well. But um, every time we finished, we drove down the street to the pizza spot, picked up a pizza, went home, and I think watched a movie. Right. So that was that. Like when I think back on that, that was bliss. I loved that.
Hmm.
And so that was something for sure when I think of like, oh dang, I want to have traditions. I want to have those like
Yeah.
rhythms and things that make it
Yeah.
like that are special. I'm wondering what those things will be specifically. I think that they'll just kind of fall into place as the kids grow up for sure. But I love that one. So that's my routine one. Bounce it back to you.
Nice.
What was
So
your other one?
So the other one is because, of that era of, moms or dads working full time. My dad traveled internationally for work, and it was only like maybe once or twice a year that he's traveling, but he would always bring one of his sons with him. And it was like this magic eight ball, like where in the world are we going to travel? Like where in the world, Carmen San Diego, if you remember that game, it's like, where are we
Yeah.
going to? So, and it was always a surprise. It wasn't like, hey guys, we're going to go to London in 3 weeks and I'm taking Rob, right? It wasn't like that. It was more like, hey, I've got a trip coming up. We're going to leave next Friday, and that was it. And then it allowed us to be creative, like, man, are we going to go to Egypt or like all that kind of stuff. And then when we finally went, yes, it was a business trip, but he catered it towards an opportunity for us to educate ourselves internationally and go to the museums and take it in, so that we would become a little bit more rounded. And so that, because we grew up in Maryland, right? It's like suburbs of Maryland. There's a lot of forests and pretty much nothing else to do. And so that was his opportunity to kind of broaden our horizons, to show us that there's more out there than our zip code, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it was always like crazy stuff. I think my brother went to Egypt one year. My other brother got to go to Japan. So it was like one of those things where, like, growing up in like the suburbs and watching Ninja Turtles, you would never have thought of like traveling was going to the mall. Like that was traveling, right? Getting like a sub. Like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So when we got to go internationally, that really did open up our eyes before we even moved internationally. So that was like one core memory growing up, and it was always alternating. So we knew when our turn was coming up, like which year, right? So it's like, okay, if I went this year, I got a 2 year lull before it's my turn again. But it was always a
Uh-huh.
check mark. Like we never went back to the same country. So it was always like an opportunity for something new.
That's awesome. Wow. Shoot. That's big because you're going all over the world as a
Yeah.
kid. So
As a
you
kid.
were
Yep.
getting your eyes opened up to the whole world, literally.
Yeah.
Man. So wait, what were some countries you went to?
So some of the countries that I got to go to were, I got to visit Singapore, which is really cool. I got London, and Paris. Those were the three that, because if you think about it, that's nine years,
Yes.
right? That's 9 years of
Yep.
traveling. So those were the three that I got to go to, which was awesome because the time that we went to Paris, I was really into art. So we got to go to the Louvre, the Arc de Triomphe. Like we got to visit all these like major sites. And then, London was cool because at that time, all the music was coming out of that area, like Oasis and stuff like that. So it was really cool to kind of visit there. So I got to like link a lot of my childhood memories to international markers or international locations. So yeah,
Wow.
and unfortunately, I don't get to do that as much with my kids. Like, hey, we're gonna go travel international, but
Yeah.
we do travel more car camping and stuff to get out of where we're at. And I think
Yeah.
the principle is the same, right? To kind of get out of your normal day to day to show you other things. So
Yep.
that's definitely a core memory. How about you? What's another core memory growing up?
Yeah, one of the ones that I love was we grew up in in a suburb, right? You could just walk down the street, and there was a school right at the end of our street. So it was only like a block, like 2 blocks away, a block and a half away. And there was a baseball field out there.
Mhm.
So we would always go and hit the baseball, like just like for a
Nice.
long time. Like me and my brothers, we'd all grab our gloves, we'd go down there, and my dad would just start hitting the balls, and we'd be catching them, and then we'd trade off and we'd hit. And I loved that. So that's something I'm going to pick up later on when my kids are a little older and can
Mhm.
catch a baseball, not get smashed in the face.
Yeah,
Um,
good call.
we're definitely doing that. But yeah, I loved that. And
That's
like
awesome.
it's funny how much you forget about that just disappears. But then like those all of those times like walking over there and just playing are are so vivid. I can close my eyes and I can see it. I can feel it,
You
you
can
know?
smell it. You remember going out until it got so dark that you couldn't catch fly balls anymore. Like that's when you knew it was time to come in, right? So yeah, I definitely have memories
Yeah.
of being outside and playing sports and just all those core fond memories of just time away from what I would consider like busyness now, right? Like we find ourselves being busy with stuff, whatever this stuff may be. But I think it was a simpler time where there was no big pull or push to go or do anything, where we could fill it with what we wanted, which a lot of times was playing outside.
Yeah. 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 This is would be a time like if we were on radio, this is what I want. People can throw in the comments too, but I would love to just like start taking calls. Like, hello, caller 5, how are you?
Yeah,
What did you do? What were your core
exactly.
memories? You
Well, you
know?
know what? If
So,
we can't take calls yet, you guys can leave it in the comments though, right?
yep. So let us know what were some of those things that you remember growing up with that are just fun to share, or are things that some dads could pick up now and make their own as well, add to the toolbox. Fun
Exactly.
things.
Especially if you're like you mentioned it, and it's not a topic of today, but it might be a topic of the future, is like creating your own traditions, right? Like, you want to have traditions with your family. And if you grew up with some, like, do you pass those down? Do you create new ones? And so this, like, what were some core memories that you transferred into being a tradition at home, like me checking in with the kids every night, right? Or you eventually playing some pickup baseball outside until it gets dark. So leave it in the comments, like what are things that you grew up with that are now kind of transitioning into what you're doing with your kids.
Yeah, yeah. So that's gonna bring us on over to some more dad talk, some more family talk
Mm,
about our topic today. And we really are, we're limited on time with what we can pull out today. But this is like I was talking to Rob earlier. This is like a teeny tiny little slice of this cake that we're going to be diving into. If we did it all in one episode, well, then what will we talk about later, huh? So we
exactly.
gotta we gotta break it up. So I we joked on one of our other podcasts about one of the other episodes about this is a podcast talking about other podcasts.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so this is a little bit going down that channel because nothing is original, but also like wow, we are just two dads in real life
Mhm,
listening to all sorts of stuff out there
mhm.
about
Filtering it
what's
the way we
going.
filter it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I just wanted to share about a podcast that I was listening to recently.
Mhm,
A lot of people who have been in like the business, like leadership, even nonprofit, like a lot of different spaces. You've heard of Simon Sinek. He
mhm,
has a podcast called A Bit of Optimism. And on one of his episodes recently, he was interviewing um, this woman named Dr. Becky Kennedy. And
mhm,
she wrote this book called Good Inside on parenting.
mm.
And excuse me, she was just sharing a little bit of the insights from her book, and he was tying that into business leadership and some things. But it was crazy, like just how much it lined up with all the other different like books I'm reading right now and things. And I just wanted to start talking about this conversation because some of my buddies who have been listening to our podcast have asked and said, "Hey, you know, could you guys talk a little bit about discipline? Like, what do
Mm.
you guys do? Or like it'd be fun to hear you riff on just how you're handling the situations at home with littles, with
Mm.
kids." So I thought this ties into a little bit, but I think we're literally just going to skim the surface today.
Yeah,
But
this
the
could be a
quote that I
deep
want to
dive.
highlight, yeah, this could go all over the place.
Yeah.
But today, something that she talked about it was that when you're born,
Mhm.
you are born with all of the feelings, but none of the skills.
Mhm.
And so, usually, generally speaking, in all of life, feelings without skills manifest as bad behavior, right? So you feel all these feels, but you have no skill on how to manage those feelings, on how to act on those feelings, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And so, as adults, we see this. This is why we struggle when tense situations rise. Like if you're not trained in crisis management,
Mhm.
if a car accident happens right next to you, you don't know how to respond. And then if you have kids in the car, what are you doing with them? And you freeze sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, or as parents, we can tend to blow up when our kids misbehave, because we don't yet have those skills to process their emotions or their behaviors. And so it applies to us directly, but it also applies to our kids as we see
Yes.
them grow, with starting with all the feelings and none of the skills. And our job is then to impart that wisdom on them as much as we can. And
Yes.
so the other part about this that I thought was funny was, not funny, but it's profound, is that Simon mentioned, he said there are two skill gaps you're talking about here, because you have one, my kids have feelings and no skills, so
Yep.
they're at a disadvantage there. But um I am supposed to teach them the skills that I don't have
If
too.
you never
So
acquired
we
them,
don't
yeah.
always have.
If you didn't
Yep.
acquire them, then
So
yeah.
some of those things we have and we can impart onto our kids, and some of
Mhm.
them we don't. Now
Mhm.
I'm thankful, in both of our situations. The great thing is too, there's two of us in this relationship that can help impart and on our kids, and not everybody has that too. So um there's just it's the first thing I wanted to point out is, man, it is tough,
Yeah.
and we don't have all the answers.
Yep.
And so kind of a bit of encouragement for the person who's listening, going like, my kids are out of control, I don't know what to do, I'm floundering here, like I just need that answer. What the thing is, you're not going to get the answer, but as we go on a couple more episodes here, we'll talk about, in the future, just some pieces of that cake,
Yes.
slices of cake. When cake is not the best analogy for discipline, but you get the idea. It's
But you know
sweet
what?
at the end. That's what you
Yes.
hope.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yes.
get it.
I do.
So yeah. So I just was, I'm just swimming in all these thoughts, right?
I
I'm
got you.
reading a book right now too on discipline as well. Not
Mhm.
on discipline, but on parenting.
Mhm.
And one of the notes that a guy in this other book, Habits of the Household, mentions is that um, consequences are only helpful insofar as they move us toward reconciliation with our kids. And so um, this was something then that they mentioned in the podcast. I promise I'm going to get to a question to ask you. We're almost there.
We're
We've
good.
almost landed back on the plane.
Okay, gotcha.
um, you um they said, I have notes. I brought my notes today because I was like, I'm gonna forget all of this. But the styles of parenting have changed over time, right?
Yes. Yes.
Back when we were kids in the 80s and the 90s, um, the our parents had different tools. And this is
Yes.
like what we like to say. It's like now we have more tools, and
Hmm.
some of those tools are more efficient or better, or sometimes they're not as good, and
Hmm.
there's still some value in the stuff we had before. So when we were in trouble, you and I as kids, a lot of times it was, what did you do this time? It was go to your room and think about what you did, and it was this separation.
Hmm.
And then now they talked about on the podcast, this, it's like these days when kids get in trouble, it's more of like, well, what's wrong with your teacher? What's wrong with this school? My wife has to deal with this all the time.
I'm
It's
sure.
like, oh, he did nothing. My child would not ever do something wrong. There's
Yeah.
clearly somebody's trying to you know ruin you. So it's the pendulum swings back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the idea is, with now what nowadays, it tends to be more of this idea of like, well, my kids' feelings really matter, but it dictates what I should do as a parent, which is
Mm-hmm.
also wrong, is what they say.
Hmm.
Um, and so the reality is we need to give our kids the skills
Hmm.
in order to manage and utilize those feelings. So I thought, let's just talk for a minute about what it is that you are finding yourself in as a dad in the stages of life that your girls are in,
Hmm.
um, as far as running into those feelings,
Hmm.
and how you manage all that. What
Yeah.
does that look like when you run into it? Real talk. How hard is that? And what have you found yourself doing as of late in
That
that regard?
It's a great question. And so I've got three girls in different seasons, right? We're talking middle school,
Yeah.
elementary, and toddler. And so, just like you mentioned, the analogy, because this discussion we're having right now, I try to educate the older siblings on parts of it so that they can better communicate with their younger siblings. And so the energy would be like puppy energy. If a puppy knocks over a glass of water on the coffee table, is it the puppy's fault? And I try to explain to them that it's not, because the puppy doesn't know, right? The capacity of understanding and awareness is very low, aka the toddler, right? So to become angry and frustrated, the puppy's going to look at you like, I don't know why you're so angry, right? And so at that point, it's more about teaching fundamentals. Like, if this happened, it's not wrong, but what could we do better, right? How do we clean this up? Why is your sister frustrated and angry and talking like that? So trying to educate my toddler on what the facial and body language means in a language that she understands. So that's how I address it with my toddler, that there is no wrong, that this is learning for you. This is how you learn not to jump first and look, right? And so with our toddler, a lot of it, when there's a bunch of emotional energy, that's not the time to educate her on body language and what we could have done better. That's the time to hold her and to let her know that she's in a safe environment, that it's fine, that you're okay, that everything's going to be okay. And then as time passes and that emotional response is a little bit more simmered down, then we can have a conversation in her language that she understands, the why behind it. Like, how did you feel when that happened? Why did you feel like that? Okay, so do you like that feeling? So those are the kind of terminologies and I guess the framework we use with a toddler. Our oldest child, when it comes to the emotions, a lot of times it's about prying it out, right? Like, they don't want to burden us with what's going on. And so a lot of it is just passive, like going out one on one to lunch. And hey, how's the girl gang? How's the group? How are you doing in school? And allowing her without judgment to be able to bring up all these emotions and knowing that my job, and I use this with my oldest. So it's like, hey, do you want Coach Rob or do you want Dad Rob? Dad Rob doesn't give my 2 cents. I just hold the bucket. That's all I'm doing. Right. And so there's no wrong
Mm.
or rights. I'm just holding space for her to know that she can come to me and talk about anything without me giving her, well, let's fix it. Right. Because that's what dads want to do. Whereas Coach Rob, right, that's like, hey, dad, I kind of
Yeah.
want your 2 cents. Like, how would you approach this? But before I do that, I don't tell her to do this, this, and this. I tell her, hey, kid, this situation I have very little experience in, or maybe I have some growing up, and this is what I did. You don't have to do it this way, but this is how I did, and this is how it turned out, right? Kind of future tense. Didn't turn out the best because I chose this. It's up to you if you want to choose that, because maybe your, repercussions or reactions are going to be different. But just to give her options, not to tell her like turn right or turn left, because again, my job is not to cover all the potholes in life. Is to give her the tools, like you said, to manage getting out of that pothole. Because I think those tools are more important, because the emotions and the energies are never going to go away. They just get louder and bigger. Now, for our middle child, now that child has a bunch of emotions, a bunch of energy, but doesn't have the skill sets yet to understand or put words to it. So a lot of times it's literally me holding her. It's like, hey, let it out. If you want to punch a pillow, we'll make sure you know how to punch correctly and punch a pillow. But I'm not here to fix anything. You don't have the verbiage or the terminology to really explain how you're feeling. So it's going to be a lot more physical, right? So maybe it's we're going to go to the park and run it out, go kick a soccer ball or something like that. Or maybe she just needs me to hold her. And over time, once that temperature comes down, then the conversation is very basic. And usually it starts with her saying, I'm sorry, I did this. It's because of this. And all I'm saying is, that's not a problem. We all do that. We all react this way. And so that's how, not discipline, but working with a lot of energy with lack of tools at 3 different stages. But I think the overall big topic that we also do is we apologize when we're wrong, when we have too much energy as parents. So the kids know that, hey, we don't have all the tools also, right? That we're still learning. And hopefully this is a space that I can also apologize to you, knowing that, hey, I was really short. I didn't mean to raise my voice. I apologize. I'm working on that as well. And so that's kind of, I guess, 4 layers of how we deal with a lot of negative emotions, positive emotions, just a lot of energy without the necessary skill sets to, I guess, transmute or translate that into something that's processable.
Yeah, yeah. And now my question is, where did you find the wherewithal to start seeing that in your kids, to start responding in that way, right? Did
Yeah.
you do you feel like you got that um, from your spouse? Did you get that from growing up, or did you learn that later?
So I think I learned that later when my spouse and I, before we had kids, where we worked a lot on ourselves. Because like you mentioned, if I don't develop those skills growing up into adulthood, then I'm just a big kid parenting a small kid, right? Like there's no skill sets to transfer. And so we knew before
Yeah,
we had kids that, hey, we need to figure this part of ourselves out to either deal with childhood trauma or the inability to communicate our feelings or holding a safe space, whatever that means to a bunch of people. But we need to work that out
yeah,
amongst ourselves before we bring little people into this, right? And so we did many, many years of like personal development and working with people, working on ourselves, working with each other to create tools that we figured out work for ourselves. And so hopefully those tools, when passed down, will work for our kids as well. And not all the tools do, right? It's a different generation. But having some tools is better than not having any tools.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's knowledge. There's a lot of value in that, knowing that you can do different things with each tool. If we're going
Yes.
with the analogy, right? So
Yeah.
you do have that. You're able to utilize that in different ways, depending on their age and stage and all that. I think after hearing what we've heard, it's easy to kind of be hard on yourself, whether
Mhm.
you want to admit it or not. Especially like if you're like me, kind of like the perfectionist Rob too. I think we
Yeah.
can both, like, we both are in the same category of like, I want to do this really well and I want to do it right the first time. And I kind of get in your head there. Um, Rob, you talked about you had all this time to learn some of these skills before you had kids. And not
Yeah.
everybody has that, right?
No.
Or maybe there are a lot of guys out there that are like, Man, yeah, I had the time, but I didn't really figure it out. Like, I'm not there. I'm not good at it. I think one of the best, I think I've maybe talked about this in a previous episode, but I'll say it again because it's worth noting. Uh, you, I think it's really important to show your kids how to fail well too.
Mhm.
They're not looking for you to do everything perfectly. They just, they don't know how to do it. So show them that you don't know how to do it, and let them in, invite them into that process, because I think it's natural to not want to do that, to show
Mhm.
you don't want to show your weakness, you maybe you don't want to admit that you're wrong, but I think that pays off dividends down the road.
Yes,
um,
and I think by showing your kids how to fail, it might be one of the best tools you actually give them. Because I know I'm going to speak for myself, I won't speak for Travis on this, but when you grow up, I grew up in the 80s in an environment where like everything kind of looked perfect. Then
yep,
as a kid, like even as a kid, you didn't want to make any mistakes, right? You didn't want to burden your parents. You didn't want to bring up anything that might have been bothering you because you never saw anything brought up within the household bothering your parents. So, subliminally, you're taught that, hey, if you have any challenges in your life, you keep it to yourself. You figure it out because I've never had any challenges and I figured everything out, right? Even though that is not true, that's kind of the storyline we previewed growing up because our parents kind of kept that side of it to themselves.
agreed,
And
agreed,
so,
yeah.
so I'm on board with Travis saying that, hey, teaching your kids that failure is part of life, and that it's not something that you should avoid. Instead, almost embrace it as a tool to get better. Right.
Exactly, exactly. I had even one of those moments recently, because I well, okay, so I saw, you see a lot of the dad stuff. If you guys are following along and any other dad social stuff, one of the ones that I saw recently was, um, the story about the guy. There's a guy talking about a story about how his kid like etches with this rock, this
Mm.
asphalt rock, into the side of his car, like a picture. And and he talks about how his response was, a lot of us would go over and be like, "What did you do?
Yeah.
What's happening?" Um, but he took that moment and he paused and he praised his kid for what a beautiful piece of art that was,
Mm.
because they didn't know. And
Hmm.
so he said they don't punish mistakes, only something else. It was like if it's intentional, or like if they know better,
Exactly.
right? There's
Exactly.
that. Um, and so if you're in the stage where I'm at with littles, most of the stuff that they're experiencing is brand new,
Yes.
and
Exactly.
so it does differ, right, as your kids get
Yeah.
older
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and they know better, and so there's a different there's a different season for every bit of parenting and every bit of
Mhm.
discipline and every bit of all the things. Right, so we want to approach our kids in the stage that they're at with the
Yeah.
capacity that their brains have, and thankfully that's another tool that we have, is we know so much more about the brain and
Mhm.
mental health and all those things, I feel like, than compared to 30, 40 years ago.
Oh yeah.
um and so where was I going with that? You'll notice, times when maybe you're kind of a little bit off the rails yourself. And so I was thinking fresh about that story, and I was sitting there, just to share with you guys a
Mhm.
little bit of Travis's life story time. Uh, we recently found ourselves needing to get a van.
Whoop, whoop.
And this is going to be its own episode
We're
as
gonna have
well.
another episode just on this
Um,
choice.
about where I'm writing it down. It's going to be the van episode. And so you guys might find there's a wide swath of people. Um, the short version for
Mhm.
this episode is
Mhm.
that, I have been unhindered, no guardrails, uh, in my brain, hating minivans more and more for the last 12 years of my life. And I thought I'm never going to have to buy one of those disgusting pieces of junk. I am better than that.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that's never going to happen to me. And
Mhm.
so, um, this is how a lot of discrimination, I think, happens over long periods of time. And so I feel like I got a taste of that because as much of it, as much as everybody thought it was funny and people like to uh, fight against me on that one, I would go in hard and I would
Yes.
just love the experience of talking about how much I hated them. And so here we go. All of a sudden, we have to buy one. It just is what it is. The kids don't fit and we got to do what we got to do. And a little tiny bit of me, my natural self is saying this is what our family needs and this is a good thing because it's working out and that's that.
Yes. I can
On
see
the
how
other
hard these
side,
words are coming out of your mouth too.
you
So
can feel it,
I could
guys. You
feel
can
it.
feel
I
it.
could feel it.
So but on the other hand, those inner demons were just like chattering away the whole time. We got this thing and I could not sleep that night. I could not believe that we just did what we just did. And the next like 3 days I would go and I would stare out the window at the van and I would just seethe on the inside and all the voices were just like you caved, like you you let that thing in your driveway, like you have to drive that in public now, like how like ashamed do you feel of yourself, like and it's funny, right? But like more
Yeah,
serious
visceral.
things, people deal with more serious things than this. I'm lucky enough that that's my thing, I guess,
This is
but
the
that is my
serious thing though.
Achilles
Yes.
heel. And so I noticed in front to get back to the point,
Yeah.
I noticed in front of my kids, I was, and especially in front of my wife, I was a curmudgeon. I mean,
Really?
I was livid and I was not myself. And I was angry and I was taking it out on everybody else. And so, obviously I'm thinking about it and I'm soaking on it as time is going by and I'm like, I know I have a problem. So the first thing I need to do is admit that I have a problem. And so I was talking with my wife and I was like, I understand how petty this seems and I hear what you're saying because she called me out, right? Rightfully
Mhm.
so. She's like, you're being a
Mhm.
butt. And so like you got to deal with this. And I'm like, I do need to deal with this. And so how can I be better? I don't know. Okay, let's think about this. And
Yeah.
so I had to fight that inside of like, but I know, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Dad's gonna share one thing that I'm thankful for about the van like every
There
night.
you go. There you go.
And it's gonna I'm not gonna be better in one day, but I needed to change my attitude. And so I'm just thinking like, how can I do that with my kids and invite them into that, but also um uh not like why would I want to do that any differently when I ask that of them all the time, right?
Exactly.
And so we expect instant change a lot of times. It's just like, oh, be better, change your attitude.
Yeah.
But I've been trying to soak on the fact that it's not easy to just change your attitude. And this is the first time that they're feeling these feelings, or they are just, 3. And that's
Mhm.
just is what it is. All the feelings and none of the skills.
Yep.
And so I found myself in a spot where I was not comfortable and I didn't know what to do and I wasn't being a good example. And so you're probably going to find yourself in that
Oh,
space
many
too.
times. Many times.
Many, many times, many more than you think. And so ride the wave, but invite them on it with you.
Yes. I think that's
Um,
one of the best educations that your children can get is when they're with you as you are educating yourself, right? Because then they realize that, yeah, they're going to put you on a pedestal, right? Like, oh my goodness, it's dad or it's mom. But letting them know that learning never ends. You never really get it, right? You never reach the top floor or the top of the mountain. And at that point, everything's going to be better.
yeah,
We try to teach them that, as our tools get better, it's almost to the point where we invite in bigger challenges, right? Because then we're going to have better tools. But I always like to educate them that it's not just like, oh man, now I have this problem or this challenge. It's just that you are better prepared for it. You may not have known about it in the past, right? You might be open water swimming and you're like, man, that island is so far away. And you're just swimming and you look up and like, dad, man, that island's so far away. Not noticing that you just swam through a school of sharks. right? Like it's because you were unaware of it. But as you get better at swimming and sighting, you start to realize other things are popping up. And so all these things just layer on to give your kids tools. And so when you invite your kids into the challenge, now there is like, there's boundaries on that, right? Like you don't want to, oh my goodness, I'm in financial crisis right now. Let's put that burden on the kids, right?
Yeah.
Instead, you know, you it's
Yep.
it's it's the when and the how, right? As a parent, it's the when and the how. But I think there are good life lessons that as I'm learning them, hey, you know, why not share that with your kids as well?
That's a very important point. I'm glad you called that out, because certainly you're not supposed to just bring all of your problems into your child's
Like,
lives
why, why,
either.
why does your 4-year-old have a lemon stand outside? Well, it's really a tough month to make rent. You know, we all hands on deck. No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, again, it's something I say it all the time, and yet I never put it into practice. So I want to call it out again. You gotta give, especially as a dad, you gotta give yourself some grace,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to take the next step to just like swallow. This is really hard for me. You gotta swallow your pride
Yep.
and get back on the horse again. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's easy to just dive back into social media, back onto your phone, back into nothing,
We're
and
looking for
just
distractions. We're
yeah.
just looking for distractions.
Yeah, that's another episode that's coming your way, guys. Oh man, so many things, so many good
So
things
many,
ahead.
so many good things.
So, anything else you want to add
No,
to
just
the
summing up this
conversation?
episode, you know, Travis brought in a great topic about, you know, as kids, we have all these emotions, but we may not have the tools. And as adults, if we really never address that, we become oversized kids teaching younger kids, right? Smaller sized kids. So I think there is an importance as a parent, not only as developing the relationship with your spouse and learning, like we read, Travis and I read a lot, you know, parenting books, but it's also personal development, right? How am I reacting to a lot of things that are going around in my environment, and then what is that reaction teaching my children, right? So both working on myself, developing the tools so that I can teach my kids the tools, but also in the moment, my reaction, how I learn, how I fail are also lessons and tools that your kids are learning. And so just to be aware of that, right? I know growing up, like a lot of times you'd see parents fighting or voices raised, and there was a disconnect because it very rarely would an adult sit down and explain to you what that meant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have expectations of what we're supposed to react, how we're supposed to look based on that gap, right there, that bridge that's not there. So I think one of the benefits or one of the strengths that I've seen within our household is the fact that when we do see a gap coming, that we're explaining that so the kids don't have to guess what's going on. Then what happens is they fabricate a story behind that, and it may be a story that's negative on them. So always being open and transparent, again, within boundaries, right? If it's a tight financial month, I'm not saying we can't
Yeah,
go out for ice cream kind of a thing, but those tools, that's going to be part of our legacy with our kids is showing them that we're still burdened, that we're still broken, that we're still working on stuff, that we're not looking for perfection, that we're still learning tools, and that we're going to walk side by side with them, not laying down the red carpet, but teaching them how to get over or through those bumps in the road.
that's right. That's what you're there for.
Mm-hmm.
You're the teacher, the discipler, the coach, you're everything to
Exactly.
them.
Exactly.
And so we don't want to forget that and get lost in the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, well, hey, that was a fantastic conversation.
That was good.
Thanks for having it, Rob. Thanks for having this conversation and the chit chat.
Anytime, Travis, anytime.
Hey, and as you guys recall, we are not professionals.
Nope. Well, we're not gurus.
We are just two
Two dads
dads in
in
real
real.
life.
That was closer. That was good.